Hi, Misha here, and I thought we had all the Miranda variants in the Eaglemoss collection of diecast models, so a while back I did a video kind of looking at all the ones, talking about what I liked, and ranking them. Early on in the collection we got the Reliant herself, the original model, and again, I'm blind, so I do my best. I get what I can on camera. Sorry if I don't. Next, much more recently, we ended up with the USS Lantry, the freighter cargo version. This is from Season 2 of Next Generation. Before that, quite early in the collection, we got the USS Bozeman. This is from Season 5 of TNG. Now this is said to be a Soyuz class, which I appreciate the nod to the Soviet spacecraft, but it's really just a Miranda variant made to look really cool. I mean, it's captained by Fraser, so it's got to be, right? Also, quite early on, we ended up with the USS Saratoga, as seen in the first episode of Deep Space Nine. This was Sisko's ship, or rather, he was its first officer. He was Lieutenant Commandant. We've had this one for quite a while. And most recently, we got the USS Antares, Antares, whatever. I just like to call them different things because the Star Trek people love using that name so much for everything. Anyway, this was a background ship from the Dominion War, Deep Space Nine. So, okay, we've got all the variants. The only one not here is the Dominion War variant with the different colored nacelles. We're good, right? Right. And then they put out this one. This is the Concept Reliant. To be fair to Eaglemoss, this is not in their regular collection. The other ones on the table are the subscription. This is a special or bonus edition, as most of their concept ships are, which means that you just have to go buy it. It also means it costs just a little bit more. And this just came out, I think it was supposed to be in April, but I didn't get mine until May because of this situation. You know what I mean. I figured, what the hell, at this point, might as well make it a dozen, or half dozen. So I went ahead and got it. At first, actually, I wasn't going to, but it's kind of bored, like a lot of us will during the lockdown times, and went ahead and picked it up. So this was what the Reliant was originally sketched out and could have been. The story is quite interesting. So yeah, let's compare it to the original and talk a little bit about the models. Why not? Alright, let's put the variants to the back for a minute and focus on the two originals. This was going to be the first Federation ship we saw on Star Trek that wasn't a Constitution class. We didn't see many ships in the original series at all, and all of them were Constitutions, typically low-end, just regular plastic models they used. And originally for Star Trek II, because it was made on a shoestring budget, they were just going to use a Constitution, having Enterprise versus a sister ship. They decided not to do that because it would confuse the audience, and I completely agree. I will also say that whereas a Constitution has a crew of over 400, and it's quite clear they can't run the ship with under, say, 100, and Khan only had 12, 15, maybe 20 people. If he had taken over a Constitution class, how would they have run it? Just saying. So going to a smaller, more compact ship not only made it visually more identifiable, it just was a little more logical for the story. So it all worked out well. And that's where our ship here started off with our ship here, our concept. The eagle-eyed among you will see the major difference. This one, how it started off, has Enterprise-style nacelles on top. It has a slightly extended saucer section. And it has two little pods below. I've seen them referred to as torpedo pods. When I first got this model, I thought they were two small deflector dishes, but I guess they're torpedo pods. And it seems like the concept for this ship, okay, the Enterprise was a deep space explorer. The idea behind the Reliant, it was a survey ship, patrol ship, science ship that operated mostly inside Federation borders. So it was to be more lightly armed than a Constitution. The original concept, a smaller ship, more compact, whatnot. That was the concept. So how did that become this? Well, quite simple. We got it because it was the 1980s, specifically the very early 1980s when fax machines really couldn't even do the job for pictures. The three main designers of the new Federation ship developed the concept that we just looked at and mailed sketches to Harv Bennett, who was working in Israel in 1980, 1981, and is famously known. He looked at the sketches, literally signed off on them, commenting that it looked good, let's go ahead, and mailed them back, which, you know, even with express post took some time in that period. The thing is famously known, I'm sure, by most of you. He signed the sketches upside down. So he looked at the drawing like this, with the nacelles hanging below, and putting the two little pods on top. They did debate, calling or writing and telling him his mistake, but they also knew if they did that, they'd have to mail him again, wait. So they decided just to run with it. Plus, I think they soon realized having the two nacelles hanging down does give it a more vicious look without, you know, it looks more vicious without making it look like it tries to be more vicious. And it just makes it that much more different from the Enterprise. So what they did, they had these two little pods on top. They simply connected them with a quote-unquote roll bar. And bada boom, bada bing, we have the Reliant / Avenger class. The name was also pretty unknown at the beginning. Some just called it the Reliant. Avenger seemed to be a popular name for it. My first model kit said Avenger. The name Miranda actually wasn't made canon until quite into Next Generation. And speaking of course, this wasn't just in Wrath of Khan. Oh, no, no, no. Money wasn't flowing like it was after in Hollywood for Star Trek. Again, it was a shoestring budget, so once they put the effort into making a brand new model, gasp, they were going to use it. And they did, not only in the movies, it appeared in Star Trek 4, I know, and maybe 6 as well. They used it for Next Generation quite a bit, which is where all our variants come from. What's neat about that, it gave Next Generation a TV show, models made on a movie budget. And they kept using them because the physical miniatures they had a larger and a smaller one, were actually really easy to film with. Like, they weren't super heavy and bulky, they had good finish on them, they didn't glare. The Enterprise refit model was kind of a nightmare to film with because they had all the nacelles and they had the star drive hanging down, and it had that iridescent paint which just didn't catch the light right. But this little here Miranda was easier. Plus, they were really reluctant to use the Constitution class model because that's the Enterprise. So Yeah, but the Reliant, they could use it, which in a weird way kind of has meant over the years the Reliant, the Miranda, has ended up getting more screen time than Constitutions. So to someone who didn't know the original movies, the original series, it might be a more recognizable ship. Kind of funny. And I also will give Eaglemoss credit. Obviously, I've got this on the stand upside down for demo purposes, but it actually fits upside down on its stand pretty good, which is fun to do. So bonus points for that, even though I'm sure it was inadvertent. And this is our original model. Like I said, it came in early in the collection, as you'd expect. And was one of their most popular ones. They did a really good job with it. So yeah, what about the other variants? Now, as I said, the original concept was more of a medium-class cruiser. Not unarmed, of course, because the movie would require it, but lighter armed than a Constitution. But by the time we get to the actual Miranda, and this isn't really from the films, but common lore from the 80s and even 90s and from a lot of games and stuff has this as a kind of more heavily armed ship. Some have even said it had more armament than the Enterprise, but had other shortcuts, other things like lacking science facilities. Kind of interesting. I think the roll bar contributes a lot to it. People often call the edges of the roll bars phaser cannons or heavy phasers, or what's it that they use a word for it? Super phasers, not turbo phasers, but yeah. I don't know if that's ever been actually verified on screen, but it's kind of been morphed into more of a, I don't know, cruiser, destroyer type versus science ship in a lot of popular culture, at least this version here. So as far as the next one we really see, the Lantry, this is very much from second season of Next Generation. We know a lot about it because they call it a supply ship. They say the crew is, I believe, 34 in that episode? The original crew of the Reliant was known to be about 200, which is why it's reasonable that Khan's handful of people could have operated it at least short term. And they had Chekhov and the commandery captain there too, so they had a couple of extra hands, unwilling as they might have been. But at this point, though, it's clear that it's been stripped down to, like I said, 3 dozen or less people. But this was a cargo ship, a freighter. And since we saw Khan's men operating the original version, it's clear that it doesn't need the full 200 complement for service. And at this point, it just has what it needs to work in its new role. The big difference, the only real difference, is the removal of the roll bar, which I appreciate the sleeker lines it gives it. The real world reason is, the lighting for the roll bar was busted and they couldn't get it to work on time. Again, TV schedules, TV budget. So they just took it off. Makes sense. And it definitely takes that aggressive look away because all the weapons were allegedly on the roll bar. The 2 phasers and the big photon launcher. So that's where that came from. And we see the Lantry type appear more than a few times in Next Generation. Then we get the Soyuz class, as they call it, but this definitely seems to be very much a Miranda. I mean, the model itself, of course, is. And it has all these sticky-yaddy bits that everyone over there insists that, no, they're not guns, they're sensors. Very pointy sensors with big holes in the end. My theory is that's what they told the Klingons, is they had used these to patrol their border back in the 2270s, because we know from the episode that this was a ship in service back then. Bit of clandestineness, maybe. These are decidedly guns on this ship, because literally when they made this model, when they were gluing pieces onto the Miranda-class, they used guns from a battleship model. They're guns, people. I've also seen this ship kind of likened to like a Coast Guard cutter. Yeah, that makes sense. And it's probably just a subvariant, a subtype, which, you know, that happens a lot in military ships. So Soyuz, and there might have just been the USS Soyuz that was the first, and they decided it's just got enough differences not to be a Miranda. And yeah, I can see that, because they did make quite a few changes to the model, but not so much that they couldn't reverse them. So for the opening episode of Deep Space Nine, we get the Saratoga. And when they kind of did a ship list for the Battle of Wolf 359, they left some slots open so that in the future they could retroactively put ships in, which is good. They did that with Saratoga. This is stripped down to more of the Lantry look, but they did add a pod on each side. These are said to be sensor pods, and actually I'll believe that more, because they look more like dishes than that. They could even be little deflectors if you think about it, like old school deflectors. Anyway, I'll take these as sensors. Plus, come on, the captain was a Vulcan science. We also know from that episode that the weapons have been moved internally because we don't have a roll bar, and that the shuttle bays are still functional. And this, in a weird way, does harken more to the first concept of the class, is more of a science survey patrol ship. And I really like it too. The model has a couple of issues, especially with the nacelles, but it's a good model. I think this is the third Miranda type we got in the collection. I think it was around issue 100. I can't remember which one exactly is. Did they put the issue numbers on the bottom? I don't know. I can't see it. Maybe you can. Anywho. And then the Antares class. We've actually got quite a few quote-unquote Antares in the collection, but not this one before. This was issue 150. I really like this one. This was done very slapdash, last minute, for background shots of the Dominion War for Deep Space Nine. And we have two small pods. Plus we have this giant pod on top. And I like this giant pod because it looks very similar to the triangle pod we see on some nebulas. And that would make sense if they had kind of a modular pod system that fit multiple starships. And, you know, the nebula in a lot of ways looks to be the Starfleet replacement for the Miranda. Kind of a multi-role, medium-class, medium-range cruiser. So if they were to use the same pod options, that just makes sense. And then two little side pods, kind of serving the same purpose as the ones on the Saratoga. The underside's pretty standard. I think at this point we were all just laughing, going, yeah, why not? Might as well even do the Dominion War variant with the recolored nacelles. Just to have them all. But yeah, these are models that really no one else has ever done, and as I've said in many videos, what I think is cool. So yeah, that's why when the prototype here came out, why not? It's been a very influential ship in Star Trek, and you could even argue it was very much a hero ship, or anti-hero ship in Wrath of Khan. But yeah, we know that the Miranda-class was in service by 2268. In fact, we know the Reliant was, because of TOS Remastered. It's on one of the Starbase diagrams. And it's been speculated that the first one maybe came into service around 2245, so about the same time as the Constitution. We also know that they were still building them at least till 2345, and that they were still in service through 2375, 2380, because they popped up at the end of Voyager and whatnot. That seems like a long time to make something, and it truly is, but if you consider how long the Russians have been doing the actual Soyuz space capsule, yeah, updating it, of course, is needed, why not? And if you look at other science fiction ones, especially that have generational ships that are meant to be on one voyage without dry docking for tens, hundreds of years, having a basic design and service for 100 years, it makes sense. And again, we know it was being replaced by newer ships like the Nebulas, but if you have a hull that's still solid, still good, just update it as needed and keep on using it. Especially with things like the Dominion War, you're going to use everything you have access to. And yeah, that's why it's been pretty much one of the most famous and long-lasting ships in Star Trek, on-screen and off-screen, in canon and out of canon. And it all kind of started with this prototype here, concept here, and became what it is because of a misunderstanding. Well, yeah, I just thought I'd do something fun. I haven't done many Star Trek reviews or models lately. I've done other things, but yeah, here you have. So let me know what you think. Any questions, comments, please post them below. This is Misha, and I'll catch you very soon next time.